if you treat every person, that you encounter, have a conversation with, learn their name as if their name is the most important thing in the world. And in a way, you never know, it could be, right? I've definitely, I'm sure in my life, met someone who I didn't think would matter, learned their name, didn't bother to remember it, and then ran into them weeks later, and it was actually important that I did because maybe they work at this new job I started, or I needed their help with something. You never know.
Have you ever been at a party and were introduced to someone, and then a few minutes later, you completely forgot their name? I know I have. What if you can learn a technique to help you remember names in general? And then unrelated, but kind of related, what if you could learn techniques how to read just a little bit faster and be more efficient? If any of these interest you, then this episode is definitely for you. Week 9 of the Not Almost There podcast, where I speak to 4-time USA memory champion and adventure mountaineer Nelson Dellis on a variety of topics. We get into his experiences climbing Mount Everest, the importance of remembering people's names, and Nelson shows us skills how to do just that. He even has a trick, as I mentioned, on how to help us read faster. We get into also a book that's changed his life that surprised me, I'm sure it will surprise you, and a whole lot more. Stay tuned after this episode for how I applied the techniques he taught us today. They are so good and easy to start using, and I can't wait for your feedback and for you to listen to this. Please subscribe, like, review, leave a comment, and at the end of this episode, I have a special offer for you. But now, please enjoy the episode. All right, on the Not Almost There podcast, I have Nelson Dellis. Welcome, Nelson.
Hey, how are you? How's it going?
Good. It's great to have you on the show today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I have many questions for you, but the first question, after I found out that you were an avid climber, I wanted to know what was harder, climbing Mount Everest or becoming a memory champion?
Wow. I mean, in a way, you can't compare them, but I almost don't know how to answer that because I guess with Everest, it was harder in the 2 months that I was on the mountain. But with the memory championship, I mean, I really put a lot of my life on hold or sacrificed a lot for a longer period of time. So you could argue that was harder. There's definitely more risk climbing Everest than memorizing a lot. So, yeah.
And how many times did you attempt to climb Everest?
3. Yeah. And I'm playing with the 4th one. I was hoping to go this year, but I think it might be too tricky with COVID. I still haven't gotten a vaccine yet. So potentially next year will be a return.
Gotcha. Is there a certain time of the year that's better than others? I noticed when I watch documentaries, it just seems like there's an insane line of people on that mountain, and that gives me more anxiety than anything, like having to kind of wait in that line.
Yeah. Yeah, the best time of year typically is spring, just before summer because the monsoon season comes in, and then it's just bad weather or rainy weather, which high on the mountain is, precipitation and wind, and it's warmer, so stuff melts, stuff moves, it's not safe. So you go kind of when it's not too cold. You don't want to go in winter, although some people do attempt winter attempts. It's a lot harder. But yeah, you go in like end of March, and you're there on the mountain kind of April, May, and then end of May, early June is kind of when you got to get out of there.
Is what you see on those documentaries and on the news real in the sense that there are these kind of crazy lines and Sherpas, helping people? And
yes and no. It's true that more and more people tend to be going, and there's an ebb and flow. Like for example, this year it is open. I predict that there won't be that many people, that many crowds. But I would imagine next year, unfortunately, I'm imagining, who knows what will happen in the world, but people will be more vaccinated. People will have this itch to kind of kick off their bucket list. I would imagine it would be pretty busy. And, the Nepalese government, so does the Chinese, there's 2 sides to climate, have regulations sort of, and they change. Like Nepal, I'm sure, is aching to have their full tourism industry back. So I doubt that they would, want to limit too much. So it's a balance of that stuff. And what other things they don't report on is like those pictures you see with the lines. I mean, those are real, right? I mean, those are real bodies of people in line. But what people don't recognize is there some seasons are just so bad weather-wise that there's one shot, and add on top of that there's some companies that don't quite have the skilled people that they allow on their team. They don't have the right experience, stuff like that. Yeah, you can get those kind of cluster Fs, if you know what I mean. But yeah, that's a problem of the government in a way, and some of the companies that shouldn't be operating on the mountain, and kind of restrictions on who they allow. Yeah.
I want to get into memory, but I'm fascinated by your Mount Everest expeditions. So the closest you got, I read, was about 50 meters.
Yeah, to a point called the Hillary Step. I was just kind of up it a little bit, and then decided to turn around.
And at that point, since 50 meters seems close to me, but
Sure.
I also heard you say that 50 meters is like another hour.
Yeah, well, and to be clear, it was 50 vertical meters from the summit. So it was on the south side, which is pretty direct vertical wise. But yeah, it would have been another hour kind of trudging along at one of the cruxes of the climb. I mean, the Hillary Step is kind of a steep section with a bit of rock negotiation. It's not trivial by any means, but once you pass that, it's kind of a chill slope back up to the mountain, but to the summit. But there's still a ways to go. But 50 meters, I mean, I was in the dark at that point, but you could technically, if it was above you, it would seem, just like the top of a building, a short apartment building. You know what I mean?
So what made you just decide to turn around? Was it 100% safety?
Yeah. I mean, I had to, you're throughout this whole expedition, you're in your head kind of evaluating how you're feeling. You know that altitude sickness, pulmonary edema, cerebral edema, which are kind of the two severe high altitude problems that can happen really quickly if you don't pay attention to the warning signs beforehand. And I had a situation with my mask, my oxygen mask that I was using. It froze and I couldn't use it for a while. So that impeded my progress for a while. We also walked right over a recently dead climber. And so, my mind was just like thinking all the things, over questioning things. And definitely the impact of that oxygen mask that wasn't working made me slower and made me have to breathe. I wasn't acclimatized for the death zone. That's why we have oxygen masks if you're using oxygen. Most people do. So I got to the Hillary Step and I sat down. My Sherpa talked to me and was like, let's go one more hour. And, I was out of it. I felt like I probably could have just sat there and closed my eyes and that would have been the end of it, But something within me said, it's not worth it to push on. I got to get down now. Because going down, it's a whole other ball game. I mean, I got to be with it to be able to descend the mountain as well to some extent. And I stumbled down. It wasn't pretty, but I made it. Thank goodness I didn't try to venture any further because it would have been pretty bad coming back down, I think.
Did you have a sense of relief as soon as you got down? I mean, did you all of a sudden feel better, or did it take you a while to get back to normal?
Tons of emotions. I think I cried for a good while. I was relieved in a way. I felt safer. I wasn't quite out of the woods yet, but also tremendous amount of regret. I being so close to something that you put so much into. You start to question, did I really feel that way? Was that, a dream? Everything at a high altitude, you feel delirious. It's like you're a bit drunk. Everything's kind of hazy. Your mental faculties aren't quite precise. So, I question whether I really made the sound decision. And, I at this point at sea level, I know I made the right decision. But, you kind of wonder how much did you have left in the tank? Because I wasn't dead. Was I close to death? Perchance. I think I was. But how close, right? There's always that internal governor inside your head that says, danger, danger. But he's way too cautious, right? He'll tell you there's danger way before you're actually, in danger of being in actual danger. But, when to kind of trust in that voice, maybe I'm too cautious about it and maybe other climbers aren't. And that's why they summit and I haven't. So I don't know. I'm happy with my decision. I look at it from a memorable standpoint. Like the climb itself is great. The summit would be great. But to me, it's like this memorable journey experience that I get a lot more from than probably having actually reached the summit that first time.
Yeah, and what's crazy about it is all the symptoms of what could happen up there are not dissimilar to fatigue and some of the other things you'd be experiencing anyway. And you're right, like the climber that you walked over probably felt okay 1 minute and then sat down and decided to rest and then didn't wake up. So I'm glad you came back, and I know that you were gonna complete it, and I can't wait for that moment.
Me too, man. It's that was 10 years ago. Literally 10 years ago, that first attempt. I was 27? It's crazy to think about that.
What got you into climbing in the first place?
Yeah, I think I love to travel. We grew up traveling as a family. My dad's job moved us all around, and I realized, once I kind of grew out of my house that I grew up in, that I wanted to travel, and I kind of got sick and tired of just traveling for the sake of, traveling. I wanted to travel with purpose and meaning, and I realized that I liked being around mountains for one reason or another. I think the main reason being it made me feel small and insignificant in the world, and that there's a bigger kind of picture than just me and us as a species or whatever. And so I started gravitating to travel towards these mountains. And then I said, you know what? What's the point of just walking up to these mountains? Why not travel to them and climb them and get the experience out of there? You get really into the culture. You go into these remote places. You see some of the most incredible places on Earth. And yeah, that's just kind of where I started to explore that. I needed to learn some skills, some mountaineering skills. So I took a course, and you climb one mountain, you want to climb another, even bigger and more challenging. So eventually Everest was kind of in the horizon there.
What point along your life did you get interested in memory?
Yeah, to be honest, it was kind of the same time. I guess it must have been like a super transformative moment in my youth when I really was grasping at what I wanted to do with my life, or trying to figure that out. Because growing up, I always kind of had fleeting interests. I was interested in a lot of things. I got into things for a good amount of time, but eventually dropped and moved on. I've played dozens of different instruments. I mean, I've mostly played guitar and piano, and still do, but learning languages and things like that. And I have stuff to prove that I know it to some capacity or can do it to some capacity still, but I wouldn't say I was a master at any of them. And then, I started to feel that way about traveling in mountains, kind of at the same time that I was really fascinated by the brain. My grandmother had Alzheimer's disease, and around then she was getting very, very sick, and eventually she passed away in 2009, which is kind of around this time. And I just was on this high of kind of fine-tuning my life's direction. Almost not, I wouldn't say it was on purpose. I didn't really know what I was doing. They were just like super interests that I had that I seemed to stick with more than anything. And I think it was just a timing issue and kind of the right inspiration around me that made me stick with it. And I really like things that push me. The mountaineering did that. So did the memory stuff. It was a new skill that I never had any inkling that I could do or have a skill set in. And it just kind of grew from there.
And was it an audio CD you learned from? Did you just like see it random and were like, hey, I want to learn that. That looks cool. And then from there it blossomed?
Kind of. So with my grandmother struggling with Alzheimer's, I started reading a few books on the brain, and memory is always a chapter in there somewhere, especially when you're reading up on Alzheimer's. And, I kept kind of hearing little inklings or reading a little bit about people who competed or had phenomenal memories and or maybe used techniques. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Not me. I don't have a great memory, but that's interesting to hear that some people happen to be decent at this or really good at it. And then this memory championship thing kind of popped up on my radar. I forget how exactly, but I investigated and discovered that most of the people that compete in these things aren't savants or people with photographic memories. They're just like people like you and I who learn the techniques. And these techniques have been around for thousands of years, and they just practice. And to me, that sounded way too good to be true. But I picked up an audio CD by an 8-time world memory champion, a British guy, Dominic O'Brien. And at the time, I was living in Chicago. Actually, I was working. It was my first time leaving the house, my home, and working on my own, living on my own, and kind of struggling to make ends meet. So I was just walking to work, listening to this audiobook, doing these seemingly ridiculous memory exercises in my mind, and slowly realizing that these actually work. If I put a little elbow grease into them, maybe I could compete and do something there. And that kind of steamrolled into me wanting to be the champion and becoming the champion and all of this other stuff that happened to me.
And you were saying too that book isn't even available on like in a hardcover. It's just available on CD still.
Yeah, that one in particular. I mean, Dominic O'Brien has published, I'd say tens, 20, 30, 40 books on memory. But I don't know. I had the audio book. It's called Quantum Memory Power. I think you can still find it used on Amazon maybe or on eBay. But it just seemed like a complete course that I could take. I wanted something to listen to, like as I was saying, to walk around town. But yeah, that's just what I happened to pick up. It was probably recommended somewhere on some forum or website.
Got it. Well, your book here, even though your newest one's for kids.
Yeah.
And my daughter's reading it. I read it. Okay. I think it's phenomenal. It's for parents too. I mean,
I think a parent could read it as long as you understand that it's written in a style for kids, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn from it.
Yeah, maybe I'm a kid at heart, but it was an easy read and it was entertaining.
Nice.
So my daughter's almost halfway through it, and she's reading a little bit every day. But it's
how old is she?
She is 10. She's gonna be 11 next month.
That's the perfect age. Yeah, for that book. That's what it really is. For.
Which is one of my questions for you. Why isn't that one of the foundational courses in school?
It's a great question, and I don't have the answer for that. I've tried over the years that I've been in this world of memory and memory coaching and training to get it into some school, at least locally, to kind of do a test pilot program and to prove, what I believe is something that would immensely help these students, especially young kids, that all they have to do for the next 10, 12 years of their life is study, and that decides almost sometimes the rest of their life after that. So memory and learning and remembering facts and all these things is crucial to them having success. No matter what new age curricula says, you have to memorize. I know there's a lot of new kind of paradigms in education where, especially in the US, where it's like memory is bad, memorization is bad. And, you want to learn without memorizing. It's like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. You have to memorize. Now, there's a difference between wasting all of your time just memorizing something. But I think that, and I think it gives more credit to what I'm trying to say about memory techniques, is what if I could teach you a way to do the memory part of learning quick, fast, right? So you don't waste the time. And then once you have it in your head, you can do whatever you want with it, right? You can expand on your knowledge of what you memorize. You can go deeper into facts about those things. You can really get to learn and push it into your long-term memory, from there. But it starts with memory. And all I'm saying is I can get that done faster. So it's not so much of a kind of a taboo thing with a negative connotation because it's boring and tedious. It's actually easy, quick, and fun if you do it the right way.
Yeah, even the social aspect of it. And I know you mentioned this a lot. And my next question is, what's the question you get the most with regards to memory? Which I would think it's just remembering people's names. Like when you meet them at a party or in a social
Yeah.
gathering, and as a kid, I that would be such an invaluable skill that you would carry on for your whole entire life because that just makes you more likable,
Yeah.
first and foremost.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, throughout your life, you're going to have relationships. If you can master the ways of how to kind of get what you want. I know this sounds a bit shallow, but it's kind of the way of the world, right? You have to deal with people, and people have preferences and things they don't like. So why not play to them in a natural way that benefits both of you guys, you know? So yeah, memorizing names is a simple thing that can transform a relationship between business partners, lovers, whatever. But if you learn these skills from early on, you know, it's stuff you don't even have to think of later on because you automatically think that way, you know? What I argue is that yes, I have to actively use my memory techniques to get them to be so powerful. But a lot of the training that I've done over the years has primed my mind to think a certain way. And that thinking a different way allows things to be a lot more memorable just in general when I meet people, when I experience things, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the most popular questions I get is how do I remember names? I'd say maybe the other one is, do you go to casinos or something like that? But that's usually like a joke question.
So
Or
how
maybe it's not. I don't know.
it's probably not.
Yeah.
So how can someone improve their memory? So if I meet someone at a party, and I'm guilty of this, right? I'll meet someone, have a conversation with them, meet someone else, and then I struggle to remember that person's name.
Yeah.
And part of it is, I know, am I being absolutely present? But the other part is, I don't know why that is difficult. So what techniques would you give someone like me?
Yeah, so that's definitely a big part of it, and it's definitely a place to start. Is the being present, paying attention, you know, assuming value in the person and their name, you know, that you're talking to, no matter who they are. I think that's a really important thing. We're quick to judge sometimes, or we're inconsiderate sometimes, but if you treat every person, you know, that you encounter, have a conversation with, learn their name as if their name is the most important thing in the world. And in a way, you never know. It could be, right? You know, I've definitely, I'm sure in my life, met someone who I didn't think would matter, learned their name, didn't bother to remember it, and then ran into them weeks later. And it was actually important that I did because maybe they work at this new job I started, or I needed their help with something. You know, you never know. So now I just assume that anybody I meet, you know, it's just like an ethical thing. Like just treat someone nice, you know, like as if they're important. They like that, and you'll get a benefit from it because you'll get you'll potentially memorize their name. Once you get past that, though, then you're dealing with like true memory techniques, which are based on basically visualization. So trying to imagine things to represent information that's hard to imagine, like a name or a number or a playing card or whatever. How can I turn that into some picture in my mind? And that's usually based on associative memory, right? What things or experiences have you had in your life that are already kind of hardwired into your brain? What do new pieces of information remind you of that you already have here? If you can attach that to something inside your mind, it's like anchoring a boat, right? You've just suddenly put that floating vessel on the surface of the water attached to the ground, right, into your brain, and it's easier to, you know, get to that boat. The next thing is finding a way to kind of attach or link what you're trying to memorize to kind of the thing or the use case, right? So for a name, for example, you're learning a name, but it's attached to a person, right? So how do you kind of keep that attachment, right? It's one thing to just remember a name, a word, but how do you remember it that it belongs to that person, right? So for names specifically, what I'll do is I'll choose a location or some kind of feature on the person's face or something about them. Big nose, pretty eyes, you know, dimple, I don't know, it depends. And I'll take the picture that I have for the name and basically attach it to that thing, link it to that thing. And then again, it's more associative. You just kind of make some very bizarre visual to connect the two things. And the idea is that next time you see the person, you're going to notice what you noticed before, their big nose or whatever. And then if your picture was memorable enough, you'll remember the image on their nose, which reminds you of the name, you know? And so it's this game of figuring out the craziest picture possible and attaching it to something that they carry with them all the time, their big nose.
So give me an example. You and I are meeting for the first time over this podcast.
Yeah. So
are you,
let's say you're meeting me.
Yep.
And you're looking at me before we exchange names. You don't know my name. The first thing you would do is kind of decide what is going to be the feature of choice. So it can depend. I mean, it's different sitting down across a Zoom versus meeting in person versus seeing a picture. So if you're meeting me in person, I don't know how tall you are. I'm very tall. I'm almost 2 meters, so 6'7" So you might be struck by that. You'd be like, wow, this guy's super tall. Didn't expect that. Or maybe, my beard is very red. It doesn't look super red here. Maybe it does. I don't know. But in real life, it's pretty red. So maybe you just see my red beard. Or, my skin's not great right now. I don't know why it's dry. So maybe you notice like a little marking or I have a zit or something like that. It doesn't matter. But let's say for now, you choose my red beard just to keep it simple. Okay. Then we go in for our name exchange. You say, hi, I'm Joe. And I say, hey, I'm Nelson. Okay. So at that point, you've heard my name. You've heard the word that is associated to this thing, right? So you got to come up with a picture. So what does Nelson visualize as? Well, that depends. Names are tough because sometimes a name is a super common name and you know another guy with that name, or you know a character from your favorite book with that name, or it sounds like an object. In other cases, and this is most cases, is you've never heard that name before. It's an international name, or the person pronounces it weird, right? Or different than you thought. So I always say, if it reminds you of something, whether it's a person or another word, use that instantly, right? Something you can visualize straight away. If it isn't, then try to break it down into smaller sounds, syllabic sounds, and come up with pictures there. Because eventually, as you break it down into smaller things, it's inevitable that you think of something. So Nelson, let me just ask you, does that ring a bell? Does that give you any association to anybody you know or any object?
Nelson Mandela, I would say.
Sure. Yep, that's a good one. Other people might say, I've gotten Nelson Mandela, Nelson from The Simpsons, the character, Horatio Nelson, like the commander in history.
Full Nelson.
Full Nelson, right, or half Nelson or whatever. Yep. Or a Nelson, right? I think even in Miami, there's a lot of Nelsons. It's a very common Latin name. There's definitely a lot of Cuban musicians that are named Nelson as well, if you knew that. But anyways, let's choose Nelson Mandela, just because that's a very iconic figure. Whether you picture, actual Nelson Mandela, because you've seen pictures or watched video of him, or you think of Morgan Freeman, right? Because you thought of the movie where he played him, I think it was Invictus, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter, right? You have some image to represent something related to the word Nelson, okay? And then it's just a matter of marrying the two things together, my beard and Morgan Freeman or Nelson Mandela, right? And you can do it in a number of ways. I think the easiest way is just to say to yourself, ask yourself, what do they have to do with each other? What's the weirdest thing I can think of that would have a reason for them to be intertwined somehow? So it could be, okay, well, you could just say, well, Nelson Mandela is on my red beard, which is memorable, right? But what's the reason? Like, give it a little more backstory, Okay, well, maybe, South Africa, there's a bunch of like forests made of red beards or something like that. Because I think Nelson Mandela, I think South Africa, right?
I visualized him mowing the lawn.
Yeah.
On your beard.
Exactly. And I also, for Nelson Mandela, I think, very inspirational person, maybe giving very moving speeches. I think in this Invictus, he gives that, he says that poem in a really moving way at the end. And so, yeah, maybe he's giving something really motivational as he mows the lawn or something like that, and you try to create all this detail around the imagery. And then the idea is, next time you see me, with my big red beard, because that's what I always carry around. I mean, unless I shave, but I don't shave that off really ever. But you'll imagine that image, right? Nelson Mandela mowing my red beard off while giving a speech. And yeah, there's the name. Now, it's a lot of work, right? It sounds like we just spent 5 minutes talking about that. How am I supposed to do that in a conversation? But with practice, you get faster at that. So for a lot of names a lot of common names, I already have an image preset for those things. So, I don't have to think twice about what I'm going to think about. I just have the feature, which I quickly choose. I smash the image onto it and I move on, But at the beginning, yeah, you kind of have to massage it and get used to the technique, trust that it works. Because memory, I think, works largely based on how much you trust it. So if you think you have a bad memory, that's like the number one memory killer. You have to slowly kind of get yourself out of that mindset.
So help me understand this for a second, though. If I'm in a conversation with you and I'm trying to be present, do I focus on that, or do I leave the conversation and before I talk to the next person, start associating your name with something like that?
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because you're trying to make this connection with someone, but I'm also telling you to step away and do this whole fantastical thing in your mind. But with time, that gets faster, and you can stay present while doing that. What I tend to suggest at the beginning while you do that is to maybe get comfortable fielding some questions at the person that are kind of buffer, right? To buy you some time while you do this, or you can do it in parts. You can have some conversation while you're maybe choosing the feature, and kind of multitask back and forth while you're doing that. And then when there's a gap in the conversation, or maybe someone joins the conversation and they introduce each other, maybe that's when you take the moment to come up with a picture and associate it, Yeah.
Knowing myself, I would come up with something and just start laughing, though. Has that ever happened to you? When you're just
Definitely.
associate that? Yeah.
But you know what? You use that to your advantage. Like if you can sometimes, especially in places where I may not have time or I'm flustered because there's too many people, I'll bring it up. Like I'll talk about it. People love talking about their names, and what better icebreaker to just say like, listen, I just read this book on memorizing names, so I'm practicing. I just imagined, Nelson Mandela shaving your beard. What do you think about that? Like what would you remember my name by, or something like that? Like even if you bring that up, that's a heck of an icebreaker, memorable icebreaker, and you've instantly made their name and probably your name more memorable.
Are you finding it harder to stay present or teach these techniques with the ever-present notification issue on digital devices, social media? It just seems like it's getting harder and harder to concentrate because we have so much distraction around us.
Definitely, yeah, and I think that's even more argument to be more mindful and masterful of these techniques, or to give them a chance to be important in your life. Because I don't have to always have my phone on me, because I feel confident that I can remember a lot of the stuff that I use my phone for. But yeah, I recognize that distractions can also kill your memory. So, turning off notifications to an extent, keeping your phone not always on you, has definitely been something that helps my memory. So, but it's tough. It's a fine line, because, it's our life. I'm not telling people to go back to the Stone Age and live their life that way. Like phones do help our lives and help me be more productive most of the time. But I just have to be careful with what I allow and how I understand it's affecting my memory,
How does memorization apply to, or is it correlated at all to speed reading? I watched a video of yours, and in that video, in 16 minutes, you do a wonderful job teaching the viewer how to speed read. Is that correlated at all?
In a way, I think I used the word speed read in that video to get the views.
Yeah.
Well, it's a contentious topic, because some people think it's total crap, and some people they want to know how to do it, obviously, if it saves time. I think reading faster is definitely a thing. I think speed reading, and I talk about it in the video, where some people claim they can do this and that, 1,000 words per minute, multiples of thousands of words per minute, and I think that's totally bogus. But I I think what's more important is being able to read quickly and efficiently while remembering what you read. So, that in that video, I talk a lot about how you should be reading in a from a viewpoint where you want to remember more, and that's where I think they cross over, because you're obviously not remembering every single thing of what you read or every single word. That's a different task, but you do want to remember broad strokes and points in the plot, or definitions that are important to you. And I think using these techniques, some of the techniques while you read, definitely makes the whole reading experience smoother and then because of that faster. So in a way, yeah, speed reading relies on your memory.
And one of the techniques that you show in the book, because I'm sure the audience would be interested in that, and I'll link to that video, because I thought it was very good. But it's really cutting out the margins on the left and the right and focusing on the middle. And when you think about how much you cut off, it's not a lot, but then as a percentage, it's about 20-30% of the page, maybe 30, I would say.
Yeah.
Which then, if you're not reading 30% of it, but you can infer the words there, that's what helps you read faster, essentially.
Yeah, because you think about time-wise, what your eyes are doing when it goes from one page to the other, right? That takes time. So if you kind of narrow that bound, then you're saving time, right? That's physics, right? And well, then you're saying to yourself, well, I'm leaving out 30% of the words. But you'd be surprised, like if you just hold your pen in front of you or your finger in front of you, you can see that I have a light here and that my desk is over there, that there's a camera there, right? We can see a lot in our peripheral vision. And add to that, we're reading something that is written in English in some logical sense. So half the time, we know what the sentence is going to continue on saying, that there's going to be a the, or, end with happily ever after. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot that you can infer from just reading the center of a page and just relying on your peripheral vision to kind of absorb the rest. I don't think you lose too much meaning by cutting those out.
How would your life have been different if you weren't a memory champion, if you didn't find that CD and if you didn't dive into that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up wanting to be an astronaut. I was too tall, but I did study physics, and that was kind of where I was headed. I wanted to be an astrophysicist. I was in getting my PhD in that, and then I switched to computer science, which I loved for a time, and then I realized I didn't want to do that. But I think I would have ended up doing something sciencey. Probably would have been a software engineer for a little longer than I was. I don't know, but I feel like somewhere in me is this entrepreneurial spirit, which I think is why I do the memory thing, which even that, it's hard to define what I do for a living, because I coach people, but I also do a lot of other projects that aren't necessarily coaching, but are memory related. I think when it comes down to it, I like to teach. I like to, take information that I know and find an easy way to explain it to someone else so that they can benefit from that information. So maybe I would have actually just been a teacher. I don't know. I mean, I am a teacher. I actually teach at the university as well, but I think I would have been like a full-time professor or high school teacher. I don't know.
That's great. So on a slightly different topic, what I did notice is you're a very humble person, but you also were kind of admitting that you're an introvert and you like to, you'd rather speak to 3,000 people sometimes than a one-on-one conversation. And you're almost better one-on-one on a camera than having a conversation with someone.
Yeah.
You're obviously very good at having a conversation, and I've seen you have many conversations. How did you tackle that fear in your life, and what are some best practices that you could pass on?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I feel comfortable now, it's because I'm talking about something that I'm comfortable about, which is mountaineering and memory, right? If we were going to talk about something I don't know too much about, I'm going to be very embarrassed or shut down a little bit. I also feel comfortable with you. I don't know. I wonder, it's hard to describe, but yeah, the 3,000, speaking to 3,000 people is easy because it's not like a person. It's just like a big body of people, And, of course, you recognize that maybe a person in there or dozens of people don't like what you're saying, but the majority of people are there to listen to you because you're the expert, right? So knowing that, it just doesn't make it very scary. I mean, I'm always a bit nervous to go out at the beginning, but once I step out there and I'm talking about what I know, it's easy. And I'm trying to think of like when I was dating, for example. I'm married now, but I'm not very good at approaching a girl, for example, but on a one-on-one date, very good. Why? I don't know, because I could plan it. I could figure out the things that I wanted to talk about and interesting ways to say them and ways to kind of schmooze that wasn't too awkward. So I don't know. I think I read a lot about that in my 20s to kind of get better at it. And then especially with the memory stuff, I was kind of forced into giving speeches. Giving speeches was not easy for me at the beginning, going in front of anybody at all. 1 or 10 or 3,000 people was hard. But, when you're, again, getting better at what you talk about and being the expert at it makes it a lot easier and you feel more comfortable. And the more you speak, the more comfortable you get. And I guess that's with anything, right? It's even with the memory stuff. It sounds like crazy that I could work on my memory and have an amazing memory, but it's a skill. So is speaking. And I think being maybe not a full outrovert, or extrovert, but at least pretending to be one in certain cases, I think that's a skill you can learn by practice, by doing it and forcing yourself to do it, even if you crash and burn a bunch.
I think that's exactly it. Like I can relate to that. I love speaking in front of large audiences because I think you could put on persona.
Yeah.
You're a superhero on stage, right? But you're in a one-to-one conversation and it's a little different, or like a 5-to-1 conversation. You can't really be a persona. You can't sit up there and accentuate your voice the same way and act a little bit. And I think that's a big difference for me specifically. I love doing that, speaking in front of large audiences for for that exact reason.
Yeah. I think the hardest for me, I think one-on-one, I'm not too bad. Because I can at least control the situation a little bit better. And if it's not going well, I might have some avenues out. And big crowds, I think, are okay. But I think it's tough in a group that's like less than 10,
Yep.
where it's not me in control. That's where I have a hard time because I don't know the right things to interject with. I don't know when to like laugh the right way or what's the joke or not. Or, there's always going to be someone maybe more alpha than you. And I don't know how to respond to that. So there's a weirder dynamic with tiny groups, that I'm not good with.
Yeah, I totally can relate to that for sure. Like you just have this loud person in the group and you might have a much better answer, but you don't get to say it because they're loud and you're just like, okay, what do I do here? And it just gets awkward.
Yeah.
I know you created a charity, which I think is awesome, Climb for Memory.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So I started this charity back in 2010. So kind of at the early point of me discovering this memory world and kind of realizing that, the stuff I just learned and taught myself, not many people know about. And if I could just get this out to as many people as possible and make people more aware of their brain being an important thing to consider for your health, right? I don't think many people think that way. Then that was what I was trying to do with this charity, is to kind of announce that. And I tried to think of ways I could spread the message better. And I was into climbing and I thought, well, why not shout it from the tallest places in the world? People are interested in these kind of expeditions and mountain climbs, and maybe one day they'll even join me as kind of a group fundraising things. And so I started with that, and Climb for Memory was created, and I started climbing mountains, which I was doing anyways, to raise attention for Alzheimer's and raise funds as well. And now it's kind of transformed into, I'm trying to orchestrate and organize, not trips to Everest to the summit, but to Everest Base Camp, a trek, or to Kilimanjaro, a hike. I run a bunch of those every year. I mean, last year we just did one because of COVID, but that's kind of what it's become. And helping people actually experience memorable things, while also climbing for a cause, I think is kind of an awesome way to go about it,
I want to do that. How do you find out more about that?
Yeah, you can just let me know. Go to my website, nelsondellis.com. Well, you can just send me an email, but if anybody's interested, we're running a trip to Kilimanjaro this fall, and anybody's welcome, and I'll be there, and you'll learn from me, and you'll get to summit the tallest mountain in Kilimanjaro, and you'll do it for a good cause, and walk away with a really memorable, life-changing experience.
That's amazing. All right, I know we're wrapping up. I have a few speed questions for you, so you only have a few seconds to answer these.
Okay.
I'm not going to time you, but here we go.
Okay.
What's your favorite unimportant thing to do?
Play video games. Anything with Super Mario, I'm a sucker for.
Who's your favorite band?
Ooh, Tool.
What's one book that changed your life?
I have a YouTube video on this. This is embarrassing, but it's true, and it's a delicate thing to say these days. But it's a book called The Game, which is a expose, I guess, into the world of pickup artists. It's an old book from like 2005, so it's a bit outdated. But I think the one thing I learned from it, forget about dating women, it was really understanding people and interactions with people and psychology. I think that's kind of the biggest thing that it changed, and it helped me be a little more extroverted, which I needed. So I'd say that one.
Did you use those techniques to meet your wife?
No, no, we just clicked. It was crazy. We have the same birthday. I think we kissed within 20 minutes of our conversation. We had too many things in common. It was like I didn't have to do anything. It just everything aligned,
Nice. And last but not least, what's the last thing you bought online? Not on Amazon.
Oh, not on Amazon. I should know this. I think I bought, a really expensive camera for my videography stuff.
Nice. Cool. Well, hey, it was great to spend time with you. I think you already gave your contact info, but please go to Nelson's website. Also, this book, phenomenal for kids and parents. And you have a few other books. You have a Netflix special. I'll link to all those in the show notes.
Nice. Thank you.
It was great to spend time with you, Nelson.
Yeah, likewise. I really appreciate you having me on the show and asking me those questions. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Huge shout out to Nelson Dellis. What a smart guy. I love learning new skills. I already applied his memory techniques when I was recently out of town with my wife. We met a few other couples at a resort we were at, and the husband's name was Patrick, the wife's name was Leia. I immediately thought of Patrick Swayze dancing on the brim of his hat with Jennifer Grey for Patrick. And then Leia, I imagined Han Solo and Princess Leia taken off of her cheekbones. She had these really nice cheekbones, and taken off in the Millennium Falcon. I know that sounds so crazy, but applying something like that made me remember their name. And the next day at breakfast, I would have never remembered it. I just wouldn't have. But I did, and I walked up to them. I said, "Hey, Patrick. Hey, Leia. How are you?" And that alone is just so much more personable than saying, "Hey, how's it going, guys?" So just want to let you know that if you start to actually practice this stuff, it works, and it's a lot of fun. Also, since the podcast, I consumed A Moral Man. It's a book by Derek Delgadio, super interesting book. But the moral of the story here is I had to read it at least 20% faster by using some of these techniques I learned from Nelson today. I would love to hear what you learned and if you put into practice any of these things and your results. So please send them my way. Leave a comment, a review. It would mean a ton to me. And if you made it this far, go to notalmostthere.com/madeit, MADEIT, to get a free t-shirt. It's my way of saying thanks. I promised at the beginning of this episode that I'd have something for you, and that is it. Again, notalmostthere.com/madeit. It's my way of saying thank you. You mean a ton to me. Last but not least, remember, you, me, we are not almost there. I'll see you next week.